Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, distinguished guests, and folks of all stripes, put your hands together for the Space Cadet Sports Podcast. Houston, we have Paul Salazar Jr.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Space Cadet Sports Podcast, your Houston sports podcast for diehard Houston sports fans. From a diehard Houston sports fan, I'm Paul Salazar Jr., your favorite diehard Houston Astros fan podcaster. Got to get some more qualifiers in there to make it accurate. I'm a digital content creator, an actor, a writer, creative multi-hyphenate. Of course, I am a Houston native, and I have the receipts to prove it. I ran the bases in the Astrodome. And this is when the bases were smaller, so this was it was a little bit more difficult than the bases these kids get to run. I've spent the last decade or so as a comedy writer here in Los Angeles, and now I'm podcasting. That's what happens once you hit 10 years out here. You wake up one day and you just start calling the movie industry just the industry, and they give you a podcast. Welcome to said podcast. This is what my brother calls the Paul Broad Ball Blog. Almost messed that one up. Hey, brother. Check out spacecadetsports.substack.com for the full blog experience, or the full blog experience, depending on how you hear me pronounce that word. I started Space Cadet Sports as a passion project because most media is infuriating as a diehard long-term fan of the Houston Astros. Here we are not doom and gloom Astros fans, nor are we worse than national media haters. We love our team and root for them, but we also want to try to discuss the ins and outs of our team without too much homerism. Keyword try. We try to be reasonable, not too hot-takey or reactionary, but we all have emotions. It's how life goes. We live in uncertain times. Times are wild. We all have emotions. This is my break from all of the wild times. I invite you to have a break from all of the wild times with me. We know there's much more important things going on in the world, but we're taking a break, having a little mental health time to talk about some sports and getting angry about things that are pretty silly, to be honest, but that's kind of the fun of sports. So let's get into it. We are recording this transmission here in sunny LA. Actually, that's what's written down here on this paper, but as I look out of my window, that isn't accurate. I have to change that in the copy there. That's what the script says. But in reality, it's bleak out there, folks. It is miserable. It is rainy. It is drizzly. My co-producer, Carla, didn't get a walk this morning. She hates the rain. Did not want to go out in the rain. So, being honest here, folks, we can try to be a little bit optimistic, but it is a bleak one out there, folks. It is terrible out there. I am joined, however, as always, by my co-host and co-producer, the Roz to my Frasier. Carla, the dog, is here with me. She may get on mic from time to time. Frequent listeners of the podcast know she has the hot takes on this podcast. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. On this episode, we are continuing our spring training previews. We are finally rounding out the roster preview as we are going through the starting pitchers today. We are also going to talk about Alex Bregman. So we're going to get to that pretty quickly. But if you're a new listener, you don't know this, but I like to start off the podcast before we fully get into it by saying a good day, mates, to all of my Australian listeners. That's right, new listeners. If you are Australian and a new listener, you are doubly welcomed here. If you know, when I started this podcast, I hate to brag, but we rocketed up the charts to just outside the top 100 of Australian baseball podcasts. You got to have those qualifiers, folks. You could be impressive if you have enough qualifiers. That's what I always say. So I say good day, mates, to all of my Australian listeners. If you happen to know an Australian, get them to listen to the podcast. Extra points if they're an Australian Astros fan. But if they're just Australian or just an Astros fan, we'll take them as well. We talk about all Houston sports on this podcast. Today we're getting into the spring training preview with the pitchers and talking about Alex Bregman. So let's get into it. I've had enough preamble here. With the Bregman update, folks, let's talk about Breggy here. Alex Bregman is headed to Beantown with a 3-year contract for $120 million. He got paid, and Boston's going to be a tough team. It's going to be a lot tougher than it was. They needed some offensive weapons. They have one now. They have a gritty guy. They have a guy that is going to extend those counts. Alex Cora and Alex Bregman are reunited. We didn't think that Bregman was coming back to Houston when Dana Brown was saying that there's a slim chance that they're having internal discussions about Bregman, when he was, basically saying goodbye to Bregman. In the last couple of interviews, we tried to talk about that here on the podcast. We are saying that there is a chance, even though there's a slim chance. We are kind of like the Dumb and Dumber meme. So you're saying there's a chance. We weren't completely expecting Bregman to be back. There was 1 week there when it first got reported that there wasn't a crack of a chance, that we got excited. Jose Altuve got excited, and all of our hope dwindled away as Dana Brown was saying that he wasn't even in touch with Scott Boras. So this isn't a shock or surprise to most Astros fans. It might be a shock to some casuals out there, but we knew that it was a bit of a long shot. They got it done. Boston got it done. Their owner and GM wanted to negotiate with Bregman and get him on the team. The Astros had no time for negotiating. They made an offer and they left it. But to be fair, they improved the offer and then they left it. But neither one of the sides really wanted to budge. Bregman knew what he wanted. The Astros knew kind of the cap of what they were offering, and it wasn't quite. It wasn't the same offer. It wasn't the same thing that both sides wanted. That's just how it goes sometimes. The Jim Crane didn't want to go over a certain threshold with the competitive balance tax. He wanted it to be a certain level even when he was re-signing Bregman. Let's look at the offers here. The Astros reportedly offered $156 million over 6 years. That's $26 million a year. That's a pretty good deal. The thing is that's just not the deal that Bregman was looking for. Bregman said he wanted a long-term deal. Bregman said he wanted, more money, essentially. So the Detroit Tigers and Motor City Kitties, with A.J. Hinch at the helm, who I honestly thought that's where he was going to end up. I'm not going to lie. I'm glad I didn't have more time to sit here and speculate on it, where I would have completely got that wrong. I would have just doubled down on that as time went on. So, the Detroit Tigers reportedly offered Alex Bregman $171.5 million over 6 years, making it $28.5 million a year. So those were pretty good offers. I'm not Alex Bregman. I know my value. I know when I'm renegotiating my contracts, for my little gigs and the things that I do, that I want to get paid what I'm worth. I completely understand that. So I'm not mad at the man for going out there and getting paid what he's worth and trying to get the best value that he can get and get the best offer that he can get is what I'm trying to say. The teams are looking for the value, but as a player, you're looking for the best money, the best offer, the most money, So, I'm not saying that those were good offers as he should have taken that, as I'm just saying, as much as I kind of want to be mad at the Astros for not getting Bregman back, you know, those are pretty solid offers. You know, you have to pay the entire team. As much as I would love to see Bregman back, that 3 years for $120 million, I don't think there's any way in hell that Tim Crane was going to pay that contract. You know, outside of a video game, I'm not sure if I would have wanted to pay that contract too. Let's actually look at what that contract is, you know, because Alex Bregman, he said he wanted a long-term offer, not a short-term offer, but I think since there wasn't a long-term offer bidding war there between the Astros and the Tigers and the Blue Jays, there just wasn't getting to the point that Scott Boras, Alex Bregman's agent, or Alex Bregman wanted. You know, I think because of that, they started entertaining more offers, and Chicago became an option of a landing place after they got Tucker and Presley, you know, kind of getting a Chicago, an Astros North going on there. You know, Chicago and Boston came into the mix with some potential short-term offers, and the Red Sox offer here that we're leading up to, I think it's pretty wild. It's 3 years. It's worth $120 million with deferrals. That's right, the terrible D word. You know, got that big D energy here. You know, about $90 million of this contract is going to be in non-deferred money. And shockingly, of course, this is the big thing. It's $40 million, you know, annually here, obviously, and an opt-out. You know, I know you're not. I'm assuming you're not a math major. I'm not. But you come here for the big stats here, so I'm doing the math for you. 120 divided by 3 is 40. Yep, that checks out. I did it on my calculator on my phone here. You know, so not only is it $40 million, but there is an annual opt-out. You know, after the first year, Bregman can opt out. After the second year, Bregman can opt out. And, of course, after the third year, he's into free agency. So not only is this contract worth a lot of money, but it gives Bregman all the flexibility and all the power. Because if Bregman just starts popping off and has an MVP caliber season, Bregman can just say, well, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach. I'm going to free agency. And sign with the Miami Heat, obviously, is what I'm saying. No, obviously, I don't think Jim Crane would have gone for that. This type of an offer is what Bregman wanted. He wanted a lot of money, and he wanted some flexibility to get a long-term deal. Boston negotiated with him and Scott Boras to get that done. You know, I really kind of want to stop the hate, in a way. I want Boras to be my agent. I mean, wow, he'd make me a rich man. I'm about to go into a contract renegotiation here, and I at this point, I'm not even angry. I wish Scott Boras was on my side. I'd be filthy rich. This deal is crazy. I'm happy for Bregman, and I hope we don't have to deal with him in the offseason because I don't want to hear the narratives already. I was talking with a friend of the podcast, Wookie. Shout out to Wookie if you're listening out there. You know, Wookie gave me a call. I wasn't able to answer. I'm going to give him a call after the recording. But, you know, I was talking about how I hope they treat him right in Beantown. And he said, F the Red Sox in Boston. You know, which is definitely, you know, there's some contention between the Red Sox and Astros fans, obviously. But I was like, yeah, obviously, I'm not trying to say that I'm happy for Boston fans. I'm just saying I hope they treat him right. I'm worried about the man's safety. But with that being said, Wookie and I are worried about Breggy's safety. No, but we hope we don't have to deal with that team in the offseason. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get to the next part of the podcast, which is a spring training preview with the Astros pitchers. All right, folks, let's get to it. The time is set. Spring training is around the corner. Not only the time is set, Dana Brown says the roster is set, and he also says that he believes the Astros can win the division. I believe so too. We're talking about pitchers today. for the spring training preview, and not just all the pitchers. If you wanted to learn about some of the relief pitchers, you can go back to the previous podcast where I talk about the catchers and relief pitchers. Today we're going to get into the starting pitchers for the Houston Astros, or the projected starters, pitchers that factor in to potentially maybe be on the list of spot starters here and there. So let's get to it. We'll get to the starters. We're going to go in a little bit of alphabetical order here, and then we'll get to the kind of the non-roster invitees and the lesser-known pitchers here. I think I have Ryan Gusto in here out of alpha order, so you'll just have to I just have to apologize for that. But outside of that, I guess I can call it alphabetical order. It's like a Blockbuster Video alphabetical order where there's going to be at least one of them out of place, and you're like, hey, they did their best. With this one, maybe one of the customers moved this around. So let's talk about the starters here. We're going to start with Spaghetti, my man, Spencer Arrighetti. Spaghetti had a really good season last season. It was a seesaw one for sure. He had some ups, he had some downs. There were some wild ups, there were some wild downs, but overall, it was a pretty solid rookie campaign for the Spaghetti Monster. Last season, he pitched 29 games, 28 of them were starts. Overall, he pitched 145 innings. He was able to eat for the Astros. He ate those innings up. He had 27.1% strikeout percentage. That's pretty solid. He had a 10.3% walk percentage, a 36 ground ball percentage, a 4.53 ERA, 4.18 fielding independent of pitching, and 1.6 WAR. So, he really, while he might have struggled, the 4.53 isn't exactly, the best ERA. He had some good a good strikeout rate there, getting the ball on the ground, solid WAR, his FIP, that's essentially, taking the ERA, trying to take the defense out from behind the pitcher to see how well the pitching would be independent of fielding there. I think really, while Spaghetti had an up and down season last year, while he did have some struggles, he really he ended stronger. He was doing better. He was constantly making adjustments. He had that Fangraphs article about what a stats nerd he is. So I'm higher on Spencer Arrighetti. This 25-year-old looks to keep improving using analytics and stats. He could be a great back-end starter and multi-inning reliever for this team. He's been able to develop without losing too much confidence to keep going out there and battling through rough starts. So let's look at Fangraphs, how they project his season to go. They look at this. These are Fangraphs projections for the upcoming season. These are not stats that come from anywhere else. These are projections from Fangraphs. They project that he'll start 26 games. He'll have 138 innings pitched with 24.3 strikeout percentage, a 10% walk percentage, a 4.32 ERA, and a 1.3 WAR. His fielding independence pitching looks a little high there, but these are projections. His work ethic and mental toughness has been great, and these intangibles, I think, will hopefully keep him competitive and make him a helpful piece of this pitching plan this year, because honestly, we need pitching depth. We need guys like Spencer Arrighetti to not have a seesaw year this time, but to kind of get a little more consistent, so that some of the newer pitchers, some of the younger guys, he's 25 and he only has one season under his belt, but we're kind of depending on a guy like Spencer Arrighetti to start getting a little more consistent, a little quickly here. And speaking of that, it is possible. I know it's a tall ask, but a guy like Ronel Blanco came to the league last season and had a very consistent year. Now, part of that is that Ronel Blanco is a lot older. Ronel Blanco is 30 years old when he came to the league last season, so he has a lot more longevity under his belt. He's a little more seasoned a little more confident in himself, even though it's his first season in the big leagues. Last season, Ronald Blanco started 29 games. He pitched 30 games in total. He had 167 and a third innings pitched. He struck out, had a strikeout rate of 24.6%, a walk rate of 10.1, ground ball rate of 39.8, an ERA that was low, 2.80 ERA, but with a high FIP, suggesting maybe he got lucky with some great defense of 4.15, but ended up with a 2.1 WAR. Ronald Blanco had a great first full season as a starting pitcher for the Houston Astros. There is no other way around it. The 31-year-old impressed last season with such a solid year, ate so many innings and is expected to put his bib back on and eat a lot this year too. A little regression is expected, but Fangraph sees a lot of regression. So let's look at that Fangraph projections here. He has 28 games started as projected, 159 innings pitched projected, 23.4 strikeout percent, a lower walk rate of 9.8, and his ERA looks to get a little higher in the projections at 4.15 ERA, a 4.42 FIP, and a 1.5 WAR. So it says Fangraph sees a lot of regression with the exception of his command. Essentially, here in these stats are reflecting. I love the fact that Ronell's command and his presence improves throughout the game. I think Fangraphs and the simulations there see that too. But I love his cambio. I think the changeup is what makes Ronell great. I think his competitiveness is what makes him great too. And he might take a slight step back as the league kind of sees him a little better now. But the Astros, I think the Astros would be wise not to overwork him and make sure he can make it through this season healthy. As I'm saying it, I'm thinking this might not even be possible. It seems like starting pitchers are constantly getting injured in the majors these days. But for Ronell and the Astros, pitching depth, both Ronell and the Astros pitching depth is what I'm trying to say. We don't need injuries. I think Ronell puts together another strong season and carries this team for at least a month or two. But hopefully we can keep him healthy, and hopefully, I really think as long as Ronell is healthy, he's going to have a really good season. I'm just a little worried about that wear and tear on Ronell. Moving on, we're talking about Diesel next. Hunter Brown last season had a great year with 30 games started and 30 games played, 170 innings pitched, 25.1 strikeout percent, 8.4% rate, 48.9% ground ball rate, a 3.49 ERA, a 3.58 FIP, and a 3.1 WAR. What an amazing season from Diesel. I saw every single game last year. I always say, folks, I might be a fan. I might not be a scout. I might not be a credentialed media member, but I watch every single game. I listen to so many of the podcasts. I read every article I possibly can. Even after last season of watching all the games and reading everything, looking at this stat line, it's like Diesel really was great, and we kind of took him a little bit for granted last season. Diesel is him. Hunter Brown is who we thought he was. He is who he knows he is. The guy gets on the mound with attitude, and he just shoves. The guy is only 26, and he's ready to compete, and I think he can put together a season to chase some hardware this year. Maybe it's just an all-star showing, but I'm betting on Brown to take another step forward this year. It's a little concerning that he's, that potentially might not want to sign a long-term contract with the Astros yet. But I think it's just with when players leave, players in the clubhouse tend to get a little sad, and I think we'll see how Brown does how he feels about the Astros going forward. But as long as the Astros keep winning, and keep treating Brown well, I don't think we need to stress about renegotiations too early. This next season, from Fangraphs, The projections here are that he'll start 29 games, pitch 166 innings for 4.5 strikeout percentage, 8.4 walk percent, a 3.71 ERA, a 3.71 FIP to match, and a 2.8 WAR. So, just shading a little bit under last season's numbers is what they're projecting. But I think Hunter Brown keeps competing and keeps getting better. I think it's going to be a great season from him. The next pitcher we're going to here is J.P. France. J.P. France had an injury set him back last season, which was terrible for the organization and for the player. France had a window of an opportunity to factor into the starting rotation, but Spencer Aggetti was able to leapfrog France, and now France is returning from injury to try to make his way on as a long reliever or perhaps a minor league starter, ready in the wings in case of emergency, like an understudy, like I had to do in high school theater, just standing there in the wings with my script in hand, wondering, I wonder if this guy's going to get sick or fail one of his classes. I think France makes his way onto the roster this season and pitches maybe even a little more than Fangraphs projects him to. What a thing to say from me. I think Fangraphs uses data and simulators and models. I just drink a lot of coffee and go from my gut. Remember who you're listening to here, folks. But hey, it's how I feel. We can see who's right. Fangraphs here next season. Last season for JP France really wasn't much. He pitched 5 games and got injured. So looking at Fangraphs projections for him, they project he'll play 24 games for the Astros and start to pitching 31 innings in total with a 20.8% strikeout rating, an 8.8% walk rating, a 4.31 ERA, and a 4.43 FIP. So Fangraphs, they put those numbers out there. I think it's fair. If I'm saying I disagree with Fangraphs, that I put some numbers out there. I'll say France pitches between 40 to 50 innings. I'm not saying that France factors in a major way as a starter for the Houston Astros. I'm just saying that I think he will be there, this break in case of an emergency guy. He could potentially take over that Sean Dubin long relief role. We talked about that Sean Dubin long relief role in last podcast. If you want to go back and listen to the relievers and catchers episode, that's just one back. Sean Dubin, it's his job to lose, and I'm not saying he deserves to lose it in any kind of way. There's just so much good pitching on this roster that if he's a little shaky, it could be a short leash, and a guy like J.P. France could end up finding his way into the bullpen. So let's go ahead and move on to some other pitchers here. Luis Garcia is still on the IL, recovering from Tommy John surgery. He is still yet to fully return from surgery. In the surgery he had in May of 2023. He was shut down last season, and I'm hopeful he'll be back. He was shut down last season when he was on his road to recovery is what I'm trying to say. I'm hopeful he'll be back, but we need a timeline for his return before he should be really factored in. But if Luis Garcia comes back to pitch this season, that'd be nice, of course. We also have Christian Javier, who's on the IL from Tommy John surgery. Mr. Invisible had Tommy John surgery in June. This one is of just this past year, and he could return after the All-Star break. Now, I'm pretty sure, you're good at recognizing patterns. I am. I'd like to think I'm pretty good at pattern recognition. You think about Luis Garcia, you think about Lance McCullers Jr., you think about all these pitchers that return from surgery, and sometimes the timeline they say is a little bit longer than expected because of setbacks. So I'd say don't hold your breath for a speedy return, not because I have anything against Javier, don't want him back on the team, but these returns to form seem to always be a little bit of a longer road than the expected return. Speaking of Lance McCullers Jr., Carla's coming into the studio. She is with us here, folks. Don't worry. She's brought Summer Santa, her little toy, with her to bring us good luck. To talk about Lance McCullers Jr., he is on the IL as well with a right flexor tendon surgery. He's been throwing bullpens. He's been throwing some of his breaking balls as well, which is another step forward for him. He is expected to return this season in some capacity as well. that is if there isn't a setback. I love my boy. I love Mr. Bury Me in the H, Lance McCullers, but his health hasn't been great, and I'd love to see him return. But I'm waiting for an actual timeline before I get too excited. That being said, with all these pitchers, I've been a long proponent for McCullers as a back end high leverage reliever is what I'm trying to say. And with all these starting pitchers, if these three guys return to the starting rotation, there are so many pitchers now the Astros will have. But just like the Dodgers, there's lots of good teams that have basically 2 rotations worth of pitchers in total. And it just seems like there's always some of them that are injured. And, before I move on to the next pitcher, I just want to pour one out for Jose Urquidy. Jose Urquidy, I missed that pitcher already. I know we have lots of starting pitchers here, but I just, going into the season without Jose Urquidy, as much as I miss Tucker and miss Bregman already, Urquidy it's tough to go on without him as well. World Series legend, Jose Urquidy. Nothing, no disrespect to Presley or Tucker or Breggy. You're gonna miss them all. But let's move on to Framber Valdez. La Grasa is our ace, and he's an amazing ace to have. This guy has fought and persevered to be our ace. And he isn't without flaw, but he is more than willing to go out there and battle for the Astros. He may get a little emotional at times, but I can relate. And honestly, who can't? But he's been working on his headspace during games. He has shown that he is willing to make adjustments to stay competitive, and he is needing a little bit more consistency. But what an amazing ace nonetheless. Let's look at his stats real quick. Last season, he pitched 28 games. He started 28 games, I should say. He pitched 176 and a third inning. I don't have his strikeout percent. For some reason, it definitely was in the 20s, I want to say. His walk percent was low, 7.8 walk percentage, 60.6 ground ball rate. 60.6%, I should say, ground ball rate with a 2.91 ERA, a 3.25 FIP, reflecting the low number there as well, and a 3.6 WAR. He's projected to really do pretty much the same. Pitch one more game, have some more innings, and pretty much have a reflective line throughout. This guy was a small international signing, and now he's a solid option as a first pitcher in a Major League Baseball playoff competitor's starting rotation. We need La Grasa to be every ounce of ace he can be, and Valdez needs it as he's going into a contract year as well. And after missing out on Bregman, trading away Tucker, Presley, fans and the front office seem to be in on keeping somebody. We'll see what the price range for La Grasa is and or what price range he plays himself into. But I am hopeful that Framber and the Astros will continue to have success, and we'll have a good problem of figuring out how much money we can spend on La Grasa for next season and trying to keep him. The next pitcher and the last pitcher, or not really the last pitcher, but we have a couple more pitchers before we get to the rotation and some non-roster invitees. But we have Hayden Wesneski here. Hayden Wesneski was traded to the Houston Astros. The Astros traded for him, I should say. This offseason in Chicago last season, he only pitched 28 games. He started 27 of them. Overall, he had 67 and 2/3 inning pitched with 23.7% strikeout rating and a 7.4. That's a low walk rate there. 7.4% walk rate, 44.8% ground ball rate, 3.86 ERA, and a 4.51 FIP. Hayden Wesneski, here's another Dana Brown starting pitching project. But after seeing Ronald Blanco last season, sign me up for the sequel, because Astros GM Dana Brown's eye for prospects has been solid so far. This guy could really keep the Astros competitive in the sense that last season we had so many pitchers that were called up. We were calling up anybody's from the minors. I think it's cruel to call professional athletes nobodies. I mean, they're not. They work so hard to crack the team. It's so hard to be a professional athlete. So I say we were calling up anybody's because it didn't matter who they were. They just had to be a fresh arm. Anybody to start that day. That Frombert Eclipse game was wild. This guy, Hayden Wesneski, plus JP France, plus some other arms really shore up any holes that could happen in this rotation. I think Wesneski, he's a Houston guy. He could be a great pitcher in the back end of this rotation. He could be found money. He really, he could be a guy like Yusei Kikuchi last season, where you got this pitcher where you're just like, why did we pick this guy up? What do the Astros see in him? But with just a couple of adjustments, with just some changes from the Astros pitching staff, which is absolutely incredible, they can find a way to make this guy really compete for the Houston Astros. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we're going to come back to go through the rest of the pitchers and have a projected rotation for the next season. All right, folks, we are back. Carla is curled up next to me. She hates the rain. I mean, everybody in LA hates the rain. They don't know how to deal with it. That's not fair. Lots of people in LA know how to deal with the rain. Most people don't drive well in the rain. That goes for any city. But not a lot of weather happens over here. So while we're very grateful for the rain over here, my dog absolutely hates it. I hate when she's sad. It's going to be a sad, sad day over here. And it's not just because of the Breggy bomb news, it's because of the rain. At least that's what I'm saying. So let's go ahead and move on to some of these pitchers that you might not know. Some pitchers that might be called up to start for the Houston Astros. Some non-roster invitees or guys like Ryan Gusto. So Ryan Gusto, this guy, he was supposed to pitch the last game of the season for the Houston Astros, but as we all know, that game was deemed unnecessary, so it was canceled. Like Kevin Spacey, it was canceled. So Ryan Gusto was not able to make his major league debut last season, but he'll probably, most likely, make his major league debut this season. He's voted most likely here at Space Cadet Sports to be called in for a spot start last season in minor league baseball for the Houston Astros, or I should say in the Astros organization. He pitched 29 games for 26 starts, 148 in 1/3 innings pitched for 22.6% strikeout rate, 8.5% walk rate, a 38.8% ground ball rate, a 3.70 ERA, and a 4.37 FIP. He has 3 projected starts on Fangraphs for the Houston Astros. He's a 26-year-old right-handed pitcher who's 6'4" and 232. He's a big fella. It looks like he can pitch very well. He has some very great minor league numbers there. The Astros are most likely going to use him in the minor leagues to start, I would say. I don't know if he'll break through to the Houston Astros roster on spring training. I mean, he could. He very well could. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying I think they see him as like the first starter for the Sugarland Space Cowboys. However, that being said, he could factor into the Astros as a spot starter for sure. Some of the non-roster invitees here towards the end, we have AJ Blubaugh. AJ Blubaugh has been a minor league prospect that has got a lot of talk about him over the last couple of seasons. If you are an intense fan like me, if you happen to try to dabble in what people are saying about prospects, the minor leagues and scouting, you might have heard this guy's name before. Last season, he started 25 games for the Astros in the minors, pitched 128 and 2/3 innings. 24.5% strikeout rate, 9.4% walk rate, 3.71 ERA. He's projected to have a very like a cup of coffee for the Astros and at the major league level. We also have Aaron Brown. Aaron Brown is a 26-year-old right-handed pitcher who started 18 games for the Astros minor league system, has 114 innings pitched last season for the Astros minor league system. He has over a 25%, about 25% strikeout rate, sub 7% walk rate, and pretty solid numbers when it comes to those metrics. However, he still might be not quite ready. He's definitely a little further down the pecking order behind Gusto and Blue Ball. And then we have another minor league non-roster invitee. This guy's the youngest one of the group here, 23-year-old right-hand prospect. His ETA for the majors isn't until 2026, but Jose Jose Fleury, he might be somebody that factors more into next season, but he is going to be with the Astros for spring training, so they get a good look at him. He started 11 games last season for the Houston Astros minor league affiliates. He pitched 71 innings with a 25.8% strikeout rate, 8.7% walk rate, 3.66 ERA. So this young man, they're definitely trying to develop him into a starting pitcher for the future. Maybe this might be a season too early, but he's getting some major league experience. And the other non-roster invitee here that I think is truly worth mentioning is Brandon. Well, I mean, we're mentioning everybody. I don't think there's a non-roster invitee we haven't mentioned over the course of our whole spring training preview. But Brandon Walter here is a 28-year-old left-handed pitcher. He's a Boston prospect with very little stats and absolutely none from 2024. Injuries look to have hampered this player. I did some in-depth prospect research on Fangraphs. It looks like injuries really hampered him, but scouts are very high on him. He has the stuff to be considered a back-end starter of a pitching staff, as he has command of 3 pitches pretty solidly. He also has a lower velocity due to injuries, but he has a non-traditional low slot delivery, which gives batters, kind of an odd look there. Plus, his strikeout pitch is the cambio, which goes with the Astros pitching techniques as of late. They're heavy on the changeup. He could be an option if injuries happen, or if we really need a solid long relief option out of the bullpen. Like I was saying earlier, Sean Dubin is a guy now. In the scouting report, it said, quote, he'll likely move back and forth between roles like Tanner Houck, another non-traditional guy, for a starter. But on a postseason roster, this guy would be deployed as a multi-inning bridge, end quote. It really looks like Dana Brown has another pitching prospect, so we have a close eye on Brandon Walter to see what he can turn into and what he is for the Houston Astros going forward. But with all that said, what does this mean for the Houston Astros projected rotation? Obviously, until the All-Star break, when it's really seen if we have the trio of Garcia, Javier, and McCullers back and what health they're at, the projected rotation for the Houston Astros for the first part of the season is as such, at least per Space Cadet Sports here, and I think almost everybody agrees with this. I don't think there's a single person that disagrees. We're all on the same page here as bloggers and podcasters. Number 1 is La Grasa, Fromber. Number 2 is Diesel. You have Hunter Brown in there. Number 3 is Blancura. You have Ronel Blanco. Number 4, you have the Spaghetti Monster. You have Spencer Arrighetti. And number 5, rounding out the rotation, we have Hayden Wesneski. We don't have a nickname for him yet. Maybe Mind Your Wesness? Wezzy? I don't know. Well, we'll have to come up with one. There wasn't one on Baseball Reference for Hayden. So we have Hayden Wesneski as a 5th starter. And as your 6th starter, if we need to be stretched out right now, that would be J.P. France, as per that's what we think here. And obviously, as we get healthier, if we see how Garcia, Javier, and McCullers are doing, that could change, and that order definitely can start to change based off of their results. So that ends our spring training preview of the roster breakdown here at Space Cadet Sports. So we are going to move on next week to talking about win-loss projections, the division, and how far we think the Astros can go into this season in 2025. So lastly, here on the podcast, we're going to talk about a couple of additions that the Astros made. Obviously, the Astros did not get Alex Bregman back. It was a long shot. Didn't happen. There's no tears here. However, I'm very grateful, that the Astros didn't wait around too long. They added Ben Gamel, left-handed outfielder, and Luis Guillorme, a left-handed infielder. The Astros roster, I should say, seems to be set as they add 2 veteran lefties. As I said on Blue Sky, it looks like their strategy is clear. Left-handed G's. I thought and said on previous podcasts we'd get one kind of mid-lefty outfielder bat, and that probably, wouldn't get the casual fan too excited, but that's probably who we were going to get or who we would sign to round out the roster. And Dana Brown went out there and got 2. I like both of these signings. Yes, Ben Gamel and Luis Guillorme might not really see too much time potentially, but it's really saying that this roster isn't complete yet and every part is going to be competitive, and we are not going to just let the same old happen. We are trying to build a competitive roster here. Dubon and Singleton and DeZenzo can't just be the end of the bench. We have to have a great mix of players to make up for the absence of Tucker and Bregman, so we're trying to see who fits. The addition of Walker and Paredes is great, but the Astros are trying to squeeze every ounce of effectiveness out of every single roster spot. Depending on how Altuve does in left field with this whole experiment this spring training, big ramifications on this roster constructor could happen depending on where Jose Altuve factors in on the roster. Dana Brown and Joe Espada have a lot of flexibility of pieces to fit onto the bench with Gamel and Guillorme. I really thought it was funny. I forgot what podcast I was listening to, but one of the podcasters was calling him Gilmore. I was like, oh my goodness, that's pretty. I know I mispronounce names, but Guillorme for Gilmore really cracked me up. That was a new one. But yeah, like I said, look, I mispronounce all kind of names. I mispronounce everything. I just thought that was a fun one. Depending on how Altuve's doing here, really will say who makes the roster in some kind of way. I think I like the flexibility on the bench here. It's as complete of a team as we can get, or as we could put together with the money Jim Crane wanted to spend. If he should have spent more is perhaps a discussion for another time. Maybe I'm too emotional to get into it today, but we weren't betting on a Bregman return here at the podcast. We love you, Breggy. Enjoy your bag. Enjoy your beans in Beantown. The Astros are ready to compete for another AL West title. I'm very happy that Dana Brown and Jim Crane knew Jim Crane's kind of limitations of what he wanted to spend, and instead of continuing to negotiate with just Bregman, they went out there, they got Christian Walker, they got Isaac Paredes, they got some financial flexibility by trading away Presley, and they're finding ways to get affordable options and competitive options on this roster. I really think this team is going to be good, and we'll get into that next week. I will have to defend that statement. Next week, we're getting into season projections and other Astros news as spring training begins. Folks, thanks so much for listening. Happy Valentine's Day, babes. Besos. And with that being said, that's going to do it for this transmission, Space Cadets. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. Please smash all of those buttons for me. Like, rate, review, subscribe, share, bop it, kip it, skip it, kip it. I need a break, folks. It's time for coffee. Please check out the Substack. That's spacecadetsports.substack.com, where you can put your email into that field. Get every single podcast, article, and meme dump for free into your email box. Or if you're like me, download the Substack app. Search Space Cadet Sports. That orange astronaut pops up. Hit that you want notifications instead of emails. Instead of emails in your inbox, you get notifications pop up on your phone or iPad or tablet. and you can follow along that way every time there's a post podcast or meme dump. Get ready for your Astros season with me, your boy, Space Cadet. And if you'd be so kind, you could actually support the podcast and the blog by subscribing, and I really would appreciate that too. You could help get treats for Carla and get better equipment for the podcast by supporting that way. But you don't have to. You could just follow along the season with me too. I appreciate that as well. Either way, let me know what you think. Reach out on social media at Space Cadet Sports .bsky.social or Space Cadet Sports on Instagram and Threads. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're optimistic about the Astros like I am. You can call in on SpeakPipe and leave a message, and if it isn't too crazy or profane, I can maybe add it to the podcast at speakpipe.com/Space Cadet Sports. Check out my other podcast. Just, find me at Paul Salazar Jr. .bsky.social or at Paul Salazar Jr. on all social media platforms. I try to stay active on most of them. Let me know what you think. Find my other podcasts and all my other silly stuff out there. Thank you so much for listening. We are a small podcast, and we only go as far as our listenership takes us. So thank you for the reviews. Thank you for the shares. Thank you for everything. Remember to be the best that you can be. Keep your head up, kid. And as always, vamos Astros.